And then, of course, King Henry VIII selling the manor of Dulwich to goldsmith Thomas Carlton for £609 in 1544. And here is the letters patent to Thomas Carlton for his ownership. Elizabeth I, there are rumours that she came to Dulwich. She was apparently at one point rowed up the River Effra, which I doubt very much, given the tributary of the River Effra in this part of London is pretty narrow. And she's supposed to have planted the historic oak tree at One Tree Hill. But what we do have is these barge panels in the college, which came from her barge, and our Edward Alleyne paid £2, 2 shillings and 6 and he bought them from James I's wife, Queen Anne of Denmark. And the panels represented 7 virtues, and he chose liberality, charity, and piety, faith, to go with his foundation. And then we have James I, and he was the one who gave, who allowed Edward Alleyne to set up the charity with the Alleyne's College of God's Gift to maintain, to provide education for 12 poor scholars and to keep the poor ladies and gentlemen, the old age pensioners as well. And they had connections in Batolls, Bishopsgate, St Giles, St Saviour's, and St Giles Camberwell. We do have a connection with Charles I and Charles II in that their portraits are in the Dulwich Picture Gallery, although not on display, because apparently they're copies of more famous portraits, but they are hidden there somewhere in the gallery. And then we have Denmark Hill. The question here is, was Denmark Hill named after Prince George of Denmark, the husband of Queen Anne on the left, or after King Christian VII of Denmark, who visited England in 1768? Brian Greene thinks it's the latter. I originally thought it was the former, but I think he may be right, because I can't find any reference to Denmark Hill before the 1760s, when we had Denmark Hall set up, although there were supposed to be old kennels on Dog Kennel Hill, which related to the first Prince George of Denmark's hunting activities. But here is a view of London from Denmark Hall, which was on Denmark Hill, roughly where the Wetherspoons pub is at the moment. George III, don't think he ever came to Dulwich, but he did have a connection in that he gave the royal seal of approval, if you like, to Harding and Howell, which was the Pall Mall shop of Anthony Harding, who lived in Bell House. And here, of course, here it is today. And there it was there. Worth a visit, this building, still looking in good condition. And then, of course, we have royalty King Stanislaus II of Poland, for whom are the founders of the college, the founders of the Picture Gallery, Noel Desenfants and Sir Francis Bourgeois, were collecting paintings to form a national collection for Poland when poor old King Stanislaus got overthrown by the Russians, and Desenfants and Bourgeois were left with the paintings, which came to Dulwich Picture Gallery. So there's King Stanislaus, and here's the Picture Gallery. And our next royal visitor, or royal personage connected, was George IV and his wife, Queen Caroline. And the connection here is a slightly strange one, and is a story of Tom Morris, the Victorian Edwardian historian of Dulwich, said. And this is the connection with Dulwich Lodge. Now, Dulwich Lodge was in Half Moon Lane. It is roughly where the playing fields for the new German school is on Half Moon Lane. That's the building as was, used by kings. And one of the occupants was a lady called Susan, Countess Dowager of Dunmore, and this was in the early 1840s. And Tom Morris says he calls her a lady of title, was once married to the royal personage. He's sort of in the right area, but he's got the story completely wrong. And in fact, it was her brother who was on guard at George IV's coronation, George IV's coronation, and prevented Queen Caroline from coming into the Abbey to join the coronation, because by that time she and George hadn't got on very well from the start, but certainly by 1821, when he was crowned, she was persona non grata, and it's this lady's brother who kept her out of Westminster Abbey. The next visitors we have are Cascina House. Now, there are stories of Napoleon staying at Cascina House. Now, there are three possibilities. One is Jerome Napoleon, Bonaparte's youngest brother. We do know he was in Camberwell in 1805, as his son is born here. He was married to an American lady. He'd been in America, and he stayed a short time in Camberwell. We have no connection with the house, unfortunately. Then we have another brother, Joseph Napoleon, King of Naples and King of Spain, or former King of Naples and Spain, who may have stayed here circa 1832, 1833, certainly in the country, but no connection that we can find. And the alternative is Emperor Napoleon III, who was also rumored to have visited the house during his short exile in England after he was deposed in 1870. He was only here for 3 years before he died. But again, there is it's pure rumor and myth, if you like. But interesting nevertheless. And here we have Queen Victoria, Princess Victoria, aged 4, painted by Stephen Poyntz Denning, the keeper of the Dulwich Picture Gallery. So we have the picture of the painting on the left, and the picture of the keeper, though I don't think this was Stephen Poyntz Denning, the keeper of the picture gallery, and his dog on the right. Now, as we come into the 1850s, it's the Crystal Palace that starts drawing the royalty. And here's Queen Victoria and Prince Albert at the opening of the Crystal Palace of Sydenham. They opened the original Crystal Palace in Hyde Park, and they attended the Crystal Palace opening at Sydenham, 1854. There she is, and there he is. They returned in 1855 when they had as their guest Emperor Napoleon III, who we referred to as earlier. And it was quite clear that they came quite regularly, because, I mean, the Crystal Palace was the major entertainment hub of London, let alone South London. And she would have come in her carriage. According to those of you who live in College Road, will have had a recent communication from Network Rail saying that the Penge Tunnel the track in Penge Tunnel is due to be relaid, and they referred to the fact that Queen Victoria didn't like tunnels, and she didn't like when she went to Crystal Palace, she didn't like traveling by rail. Well, I don't think she ever traveled by rail, and whether or not she liked tunnels, the only tunnel that she would have affected her, of course, was the now derelict Sydenham Tunnel, which was part of the Crystal Palace high level railway, but I don't think she ever did. So, but what we do know, and it's a bit more, there's several references to this. There she is in her carriage. She was being driven to the Crystal Palace along College Road when she saw what is now Pickwick Cottage, and she saw that it, as it does now, quite a rather nice garden in the front. And she stopped and asked to speak to the lady who'd done the gardening. And this was a lady called Sarah Naylor. This was in the late 1850s, because, of course, Prince Albert died in 1861 and Queen Victoria went into mourning. So I doubt she visited the Crystal Palace after that. So it must have been in the late 1850s when she met the lady of the house, Sarah Naylor, who was whose husband was one of the state's governors, quite a wealthy merchant in town, in the city. And here's a few other people who met Queen Victoria. We have Tom Morris, local character. Tom Morris dwarf is perhaps not the right word today. He was very of short stature, shall we say. He was quite a well-known violinist and also quite a well-known artist. And he met Queen Victoria in 1860 in connection with his art when he was at the Royal Academy. We have here Colonel Shadwell Clerk, who was part of the Queen's honorary bodyguard in the 1870s, and later Grand Scribe and Secretary General of the Masons. So quite an important man. He lived in Farquhar Road. And then we have another Bell House connection. We have Widdowson and Veal, the silversmiths. Widdowson lived at Bell House and later at the White House on the corner of Dulwich Village and Village Way. And he was by royal appointment to Queen Victoria with his shop in the Strand. On the subject of Queen Victoria, we have here the East Dulwich Jubilee Fountain in Goose Green, 1887. In fact, opened a year later by the then MP, Sir Blundell Maple, he of the furniture. And what's interesting of the newspaper article, the report that goes with it, was that it was raining cats and dogs and that he rushed out from cover, said a few words to open it officially, and then ran back. And here they are at the opening, covered in umbrellas. 1897, we have the Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. Now, this is an interesting shot. This is of Half Moon, the main Half Moon Lane. It's 1897. Some may not agree with me, but the buildings were certainly built by then. The pub was up in 1896, the shops likewise. And this is a horse-drawn bus. So it would be, that's when it was. It's not any later than that. But here we have a more mysterious one, which is the Edward, Prince of Wales, and his accident in Half Moon Lane. Here he is, aged about 30, young man, nothing better to do. Here is Half Moon Lane, where the accident happened. Obviously, it didn't look like this in 1869, but the story is he'd been to the Crystal Palace entertaining the Khedive Ismail from Egypt, because Britain at the time was very keen on taking over, well, had taken over by then, the Suez Canal from the French, and very keen to reinforce their, if you like, strong relationship with the Egyptians. And they took the Khedive and his two sons, Egyptian princes, to Crystal Palace and entertainment. It was described in the paper as the refreshment, the fireworks and everything surpassed even the Palace of Versailles. So it must have been quite a show. But the Prince of Wales and the young princes were obviously riding back through Dulwich, and they turned left down Half Moon Lane, and they started to race each other. Whether it was just, they were having a bit of a laugh or whatever. But what happened was that Edward's carriage crashed into the Egyptians, and the Egyptians were thrown onto the road. And they weren't badly injured, luckily, but their driver was, and they had to call a local doctor, and they had to take him home in a hansom cab. But that's Half Moon Lane's. Then we come, only a year later, Edward is in a much more serious mood. He's been invited to the opening of the new college at Dulwich College with Princess Alexandra. And here he is, a rather dodgy painting, which the college has in their record, but here he is on the stage. This is the Great Hall. You might struggle to imagine it, but there we are. And he was at the prize. They combined Founders' Day with the prize giving and the opening of the college, and he was invited along to hand out the prizes. His father, Prince Albert, had got the Reverend William Rogers, chair of the governor, appointed as chair of the governors. And as some of you will know, that Mr. Rogers, the Reverend Rogers, and Canon Carver, the master of the college, had a slightly different approach to things. In fact, they didn't get on at all. And Rogers was constantly trying to get rid of Carver because Carver saw the college as being, a really special school and made you know, in the sort of Eton and Westminster type class, whereas Rogers had his eye on the estates, Dulwich Estates money, and how he could spread it round to other schools. But the report of the prize giving said that Rogers really put Canon Carver's nose out of joint, because he insisted that Carver had arranged special, you know, buffet and everything for the prince, but Rogers took him away took the prince away, and they smoked cigars, and he never let him out to meet Canon Carver. An unhappy relationship, and Canon Carver, I'd say, left soon after his stretching, but he left. The next time the Prince of Wales is in Dulwich, he's opening the Hither Green Hospital, which of course is not in Dulwich, but he came back along Lordship Lane, and he came past the fire station, which was newly completed, the Lordship Lane fire station. And there was a comment in the newspaper article that the decorations that they used along the road had obviously been reused from Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, which was in the same year. So the Camberwell Council had merely taken the Queen Victoria's thing, rehung them for the Prince of Wales. But here he was. Here's another newspaper. This is him in later life. And he's again at the Crystal Palace. And this is a newspaper report for a local saying that he remembers King Teddy driving through Dulwich village. He remembers him with the Shah of Persia and Zulu king. But as he says, the king was taking them up to Sydenham to show them the breathtaking wonders of the palace. And now we move on to some other royalties. We have Princess Mary Adelaide, Duchess of Teck, mother of Queen Mary, who laid the foundation of St. Barnabas Church in 1892. And the installation of the organ at St. Barnabas Church was 1897 to commemorate Queen Victoria's Jubilee. And here's two shots of St. Barnabas before well, obviously before it was burnt down, but before, in fact, the tower was built, because the tower that many of you will remember comes slightly later. So there's Queen Mary's mother. And here's the future Queen Mary. There she is with her various other children. And here's Queen Mary and George V at their coronation. They married in 1893. And here they are at their coronation in 1911, which was an excuse for King George and Queen Mary to visit Dulwich, again on their way to the Crystal Palace. And here we are at the junction of Dulwich Village and Village Way here. The water trough was in the middle of the road, hasn't been there for some time. Police box you can see here. So you're looking down towards Dulwich Village, and here's the pointed sign. And this is what they were going to see, the Festival of Empire, the place of 1,000 entertainments, the most brilliant exhibition ever organized. But that's what they were going to see. And here they are driving through Dulwich. There's Queen Mary with one of her hats. And here's George waving his hat. And here's the children waving their flags, welcoming them. And here we know the date, May the 12th, 1911. And here's a comment. Here's the toll gate. There's the toll gate house. So we're looking up College Road. And they're saying here, on the visit, the King and the Queen to Crystal Palace, the toll gate of College Road will be free to the public. It was very seldom it's free to the public. And there's a little comment here that Purdy, who was the gatekeeper, was very insistent everyone should pay. And when the previous royal, it doesn't specify who it was, rode through without paying, he sent the palace a bill and was paid. There's a comment here that apparently the sovereign and certain servants of the crown are not liable to pay the tolls, but he got paid. And George V and Queen Mary again, here they are at the opening of King's College Hospital. He laid the foundation, his father laid the foundation stone in 1909, and they opened it, King George opened it. Here are the nurses, and here's the building. You'd be hard-pressed to recognize it now. Here, of course, is Queen Mary. We were not able to get a shot of her actually in the park, unfortunately. There are some available, but they're rather expensive. But here she is. Here are the rhododendrons, and you can see that seating area is still there, though I don't think you can sit in it. And of course, the fire station is behind. But this is a different picture, and she came regularly, although interestingly enough, there are not that many newspaper reports of the time. There are in the 30s, but not generally at other times. But of course, we have the Queen Mary gates that were named after her by the LCC after her death in the 50s. So they weren't called the Queen Mary gates, but that's how she came in, when she came in first in her carriage and then in her car to go and visit the American Garden. Here she is in 1932 visiting Lapswood on Sydenham Hill. Lapswood was Charles Barry Jr.'s house, the architect of the Dulwich College, the new college, and it was still there as late as the 1950s before being demolished. And she's visited the Central Committee on Women's Training Unemployment, which was an unemployment scheme for training generally Welsh and Northern girls in domestic service. They were called Sunshine Susie. So basically it was a school for maids. And here she is coming to meet the students. And there's an interesting comment that someone else visits a couple of years later, and they're shown a fan, electric fan, that Queen Mary donated to the house, because when she visited, it was so hot that she felt the poor girls were suffering, and she donated them a fan. We're just going to divert slightly to Bertie Sheldrake, who had really nothing to do with Queen Mary, but lived in East Dulwich and became the king, well, the king designate for a very short period of Chinese Turkestan. He was a Muslim, he became a Muslim. He was a pickle manufacturer in real life, but became a Muslim. And in various, Sharon has written about it on our website, for various reasons, was asked to become king of this far-flung Islamic Republic. And in some ways, it has a sort of connection with today, because when the Russians and the Chinese realized what was happening, that the country was going to become independent, they invaded, or the Russians invaded, and actively prevented him taking up his role. And he returned to Dulwich, where he lived a little bit longer, but he was always known as the Sinkiang King. Here we have George V's Silver Jubilee, a party in Ulverscroft Road. We'll see some more Jubilee parties in a minute. And we don't think George VI ever did visit Beech Grove on Sydenham Hill. But those of you who will remember the King's speech, we thought that was a nice little connection. That's the house that Lionel Logue lived in. But he did visit, the King and the Queen visited the East Dulwich estate after a particularly bad bomb incident in 1940. And of course, there's the Queen and the King. And here we, of course, this is what they were visiting. Here are the stretcher railings. And here is the Society's, there's Brian Green talking, the Society's dedication ceremony to the information sign that we put up recently to tell about the incident. And there's a picture of the King and the Queen on the board. Queen Mary again, this is in the 40s, late 40s. She's visiting Dulwich to look at the best prefab garden in Camberwell, or in London, in fact. And she has a car accident. Her car hits another car driving over Westminster Bridge, but she's okay. And she carries on through, pardon me, to East Dulwich. And here she is having tea with the winner of the competition, as again with her hat on. She's getting fairly old now. And here's the garden that she came to see. Here's the chaps sitting in the garden. And we're now turning to 1953, the coronation. And there's a story here of Bell House, which then, of course, was a boarding house. And the college had a television set there to show the boys the coronation, but there was insufficient room. So the master who's in charge put half of the boys out to dig a pond in the garden. And here's a picture of the pond in the garden. It's long gone now, but it's still gathering water even there. There's a depression in the garden where you can see where the pond was. But more thing, we had the coronation fete at the Sainsbury's Griffin Sports Ground in August 53. And here are a few happy punters. And a bit more sporting cricket matches. So that's what we did for the coronation, 53 coronation. And this is Vernon Frederick Hall, who's an anaesthetist, well-known anaesthetist, who lived in this house here, still part of Dulwich Prep, 38 Alleyne Park, and he was part of the team that attended the births of all the Queen's children. He was a very well-known anaesthetist. And here we have 1953, the Queen Mother reopens the picture gallery after it's been rebuilt, after suffering war damage. You can see there's College Road behind us. You can see the house. That house is still there, and here she is walking along. She is very well dressed. Can't say the same for the chaps accompanying her. Here she is inside the gallery, the various great and the good. I think that's Anthony Blunt there. And she's looking around, different pictures, different way they'd held the pictures in those days. Here she is signing the book, and here she is walking out. The next royal visit is Princess Alexandra, who visits in 1956 to lay the foundation stone for the new St. Clement's Church in East Dulwich. There's the church, and there is the foundation stone. Not a great picture, unfortunately, but she was there. But here we're back to the Queen Mother again. Now, this is Gilkes Crescent. This is Dick Fisher, who lived in Gilkes Crescent and was the winner of the Camberwell's Best Garden competition. And the Queen Mother visited him twice, I think, to award him a prize. There's the mayor. And there's Dick Fisher himself. So she's come to see the garden. Perhaps not in the style that we'd look for gardens these days, but it was quite a garden. It appeared on the front page of gardening magazines and things. It was quite a well-known event. And now we're back we moved on to 1969 when the Duke of Edinburgh opens the Christensen Hall at Dulwich College. Here he is with the headmaster. And here he is addressing the boys. So he's at the back. So there's Huntslip Road. He's at the back of the building overlooking the playing fields. And here they all are. It's a pity it's all black and white, but the colour pictures aren't nearly as good as the black and white ones. And here he is being entertained, being shown around. Obviously, he's look how young and being shown the various workshops and art rooms, and he was shown this hovercraft, which the story is went slightly berserk over the playing fields when they actually got it running. But here he is at in the Christensen Hall. Meanwhile, his cousin Prince George of Denmark, a different Prince George from the one we met earlier, was at Alleyne's dealing with the CCF, inspecting the CCF. So obviously they all came down en bloc because very shortly afterwards, the Queen Mother had a garden party, was attending the garden party at the picture gallery for the 350th anniversary, which would have been in 1969. No pictures, unfortunately. Now we've moved on to 1974. Now, one of Dulwich's most famous indirect royal connections, of course, is Brian McConnell, who was one of the people who tried to stop the Princess Anne kidnap in the Mall and was shot for his efforts. Many of you will know Brian. He was a real character. Well, he was certainly a character. He'd been a character in real life. He was a journalist, well-known journalist in Fleet Street, one time news editor of the Sun newspaper. And knowing Brian, you could just imagine he would be the sort of bloke who would stop his cab, thinking, what the heck's going on, and walk up to the gunman saying, you know, here, my chap, put the gun down. And probably wasn't surprised that he got shot after. But here he is, the Queen and Princess Anne are at a ceremony when Mark Phillips is there, when all of the people who helped Princess Anne at the kidnapping met the Queen. But here he is, much younger. Most of you will remember him much older than that. Princess Anne hasn't visited other than, well, she didn't visit in the 70s, so her only visit was to Jags in 1991, and here she is there. But let's go back to the Queen's Jubilee, back to the 1970s, when the Society restored the Silver Jubilee, Dr. Webster's fountain. Here's the plaque. I don't know that it's still there. We prepared the Dulwich Society Queen's Jubilee Trees Walk, which a new version will appear, I think, in your next journal. We have here some of the celebrations in Dulwich. This one's in Carlton Avenue. This one in Dulwich Village to commemorate the Silver Jubilee. But this, I think, is the best one. This must have been the council's show at Bel Air House. I don't know if any of you remember it, but the thought of to commemorate the Silver G, having a full Napoleonic battle in costume, and then an evening of Austrian folk dancing, followed by a dog show and Latin American dancing, doesn't seem an obvious way of celebrating, but there is Bel Air House. And of course, in those days, it was run by the council. Here's more street parties, 1981, Creeper Street and Burbage Road, to celebrate Prince Charles and Diana Spencer's wedding. Very patriotic, I think, there. 1986, picture of Brian encouraging. There seems to be some sort of tradition of having tug of war at these events. There's several, Burbage Road and other roads seem to quite like the idea, but here's the fancy dress, children's fancy dress. Here we have Prince Charles's first visit to the gallery, as far as we can say, 1987. When he's awarding, it's all about education. And Gillian Wolfe, who was the education officer, is getting the prize. And here's the newspaper article. There she is. Prince Charles looking a lot younger than we'll see him shortly. Then same year, we have Princess Margaret's only visit to the gallery, as far as we know. And she comes with the Duchess of York. And there was this story here about the Duchess of York meeting her old boss when she was, I'm not sure, she probably wanted William Drummer, to talk about fetching the hamburgers and typing letters. But anyway, yeah, it's a good point. The invoices, well, they were at that time, probably not now, more valuable than the painting they bought. He was a former chairman of the Friends. And then she was back because she was, for a short period, worked with the gallery. Oh dear, I spelled it wrong. There's Gillian again, and of course, a much younger version of our president, Kenneth Wolfe. And now we come to 2000, when we have the reopening with the Queen. Here's the Queen, Lord Sainsbury, walking through the gallery, the pictures and the nice new floor, we remember. She's again, and she's meeting the children outside. Again, very patriotic. Lord Sainsbury, Queen talking to people, talking to Gillian again. And then we have the Queen's Golden Jubilee party in Druce Road. Quite a good shot there. Lots of happy people. Prince Charles is back in 2003. There's the mayor. Not quite sure what he was here for. And he seemed to meet Timothy West and Prunella Scales. Again, it's a bit light on information, but there he is. They're having a chat. And then we move on to 2011, the wedding of Prince William Kate. This again is in Burbage Road. They got onto the tug of war later, but I didn't show the photograph of that's the barbecue in the street. And I think that's a rather clever shot there. And here they are in 2012 when we had Prince Charles, Duchess of Cornwall, and the Duchess of Cambridge at the picture gallery all at one go. Here is Prince Charles wearing his favorite double-breasted suit. Here they are participating, all three of them together, doing a bit of ironing. I suspect, yes, I don't know how good Prince Charles would have been at that. And we're moving on a bit. We have 10 years later, the Duke of Gloucester, who came to open the concrete house before and afterwards. I think several of us were at the event, and it was an illustration of our former MPs' inability to turn up on time places when she arrived just as he was leaving. And then we have, to end, Prince William, who was at Dulwich Hamlet Football Club in 2020. And there he is listening to what he's being told about the club. So that's the Queen at the end. So it is a shame that it's no longer like that, but it isn't.